You haul the massive deer carcass back to camp, your muscles trembling and aching from the grueling, exhausting hunt across the wild, unforgiving prehistoric landscape. You finally drop the heavy meat onto the dirt. Instantly, the strict, unspoken laws of your ancient tribe force you to take out your stone knife. You have to slice and share every single piece equally with everyone around the fire, keeping absolutely nothing extra for yourself, despite your immense effort.
No, not you, not that. Give it. I didn't take anything. Give it to us. Fine, here.
But if you try to hide even a small piece of that meat, you would be harshly punished, mocked, or even banished from the entire group. But if you try to hide even a small piece of that meat, you would be harshly punished, mocked, or even banished from the entire group. For nearly 300,000 years, absolute equality wasn't just a polite moral choice. It was the only possible way your species survived the brutal elements. In this ancient world, no one is allowed to be richer or more powerful than anyone else. Hoarding food is considered a dangerous, toxic threat. But then, something catastrophic happens. The moment you build the very first grain silo to hoard your harvested wheat, everything you know completely shatters. A toxic new invention called power is born, destroying your freedom forever. To understand why, we have to look closely at your modern life today. Today, you live in a world where just 1% of the population holds more wealth than the rest of humanity combined. It feels normal. You constantly compare your salary, your house, and your status to your neighbors, feeling a deep, exhausting pressure to accumulate more and more stuff. But your brain was never actually designed for this endless competition. Your ancestors survived by sharing everything, relying completely on the tight bonds of the tribe. So how do we go from sharing every scrap of meat to hoarding millions of dollars while others starve in the streets right outside? The answer doesn't lie in human nature, but in a massive mistake made about 12,000 years ago, during the dawn of the agricultural revolution. You traded your hunting spear for a wooden hoe, thinking you were securing a safe future. But you were actually walking straight into a trap. Before we explore how the wheat trap snapped shut, we need to understand just how fiercely your ancestors fought to keep anyone from becoming a boss. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Richard Lee lived with the Jew/Hoansi tribe, a modern hunter-gatherer group in the Kalahari Desert. He wanted to thank them by buying the biggest, fattest ox he could find for their feast. He expected cheers and endless, joyful gratitude. Instead, the tribe looked at the massive pile of fat meat and started complaining. They called it skinny, sick, and just a worthless bag of bones. You would probably be as totally confused as Lee was. Why on earth were they insulting a perfectly good, massive feast that was given for free? When Lee finally asked a wise tribal elder why they mocked his generous gift, the answer revealed the deepest psychological secret of our species' survival. The elder explained, when a young man kills much meat, he comes to think of himself as a chief or a big man. He thinks of the rest of us as his servants or inferiors. We cannot accept this. His pride will eventually lead to violence. So we always speak of his meat as worthless. This cools his heart and makes him gentle. They actively destroyed his ego to maintain peace. Anthropologists call this practice insulting the meat. It is a deliberate social tool used by ancient foragers to prevent anyone from accumulating dangerous power. This is the true meaning of being egalitarian. It didn't mean they were naturally peaceful angels. It meant they violently rejected any form of hierarchy. There were no police or prisons. If someone tried to boss others around, the entire tribe would simply unite to mock, ignore, or shun them. In extreme cases, an arrogant hoarder would be exiled from the camp. And in the harsh prehistoric wilderness, being alone meant certain, miserable death. For hundreds of thousands of years, this intense social pressure kept humanity perfectly equal. No kings, no peasants, and absolutely no hoarding of resources. But around 12,000 years ago, the global climate started to warm. The ice age retreated, and human beings made a fatal decision to settle down. You find a lush river valley where wild wheat grows thicker than you have ever seen. Instead of following the animal herds, your tribe decides to stop. Why keep walking in the freezing wind when there is a massive buffet of wild grain right here? It seems like an absolute paradise. For the first time in human history, you build permanent stone temples and heavy mud houses. A famous example is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Built around 11,000 years ago, these massive stone structures proved that your ancestors were no longer moving. They were finally putting down roots. But staying in one place creates a dangerous new problem. As you stop moving, your tribe's population suddenly explodes beyond what wild nature provides. There are too many hungry mouths to feed with just wild grain and random hunting. So, you decide to plant the wheat yourself. You clear the rocky land, pull out the stubborn weeds, and carry heavy buckets of water every single day beneath the scorching hot sun. You believe that you are domesticating the wheat, bending nature to your mighty will. But let us stop and look at this differently. Evolutionary biologist Jared Diamond famously called agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race. And he was absolutely right. Think about it. Did you really domesticate the wheat? Or did the wheat actually domesticate you, turning you into its obedient, exhausted servant? Before agriculture, your ancestors worked maybe 15 to 20 hours a week hunting and gathering. The rest of the time was for sleeping and playing. Now, you are trapped in the dirt from sunrise to sunset. Your spine bends, your joints ache, and your hands bleed from endless labor. The wheat cannot defend itself from insects, so you protect it. The wheat needs water, so you carry it. The wheat cannot spread its seeds, so you do all the heavy lifting for it. In exchange for a few extra calories, you traded your total freedom to become an agricultural slave. But the terrible physical pain was nothing compared to the dark social nightmare you just created. Because for the very first time, food could be locked away. To a hunter-gatherer, the concept of owning wild animals or wild plants was completely absurd. But a locked mud silo full of grain changed everything. For the very first time in human evolution, you looked at a massive pile of life-saving calories and boldly declared, "This is mine, not ours." When a hungry neighbor comes asking for a share, you no longer feel the ancient tribal obligation to divide it equally. You simply say no. This single refusal shattered 300,000 years of mandatory sharing. But keeping a massive surplus of food instantly created a terrifying and deadly new dynamic. Unlike a wild deer that can run away, your wheat field and your heavy mud grain silo are permanently stuck exactly where they are. In the old days, if a rival group threatened your hunter-gatherer tribe, you simply packed up your light tools and walked into the vast forest. But as a farmer, running away means abandoning your entire harvest. If you leave your precious silo behind, you and your family will absolutely starve. Because you are permanently chained to your land, you suddenly become a very easy target for any starving group passing by your wealthy village. To protect your hoarded calories, you are forced to build something your ancient ancestors never needed: heavy wooden walls and deep defensive trenches. You quickly realize you cannot farm the fields and watch the walls at the exact same time. So, you use your surplus food to hire help. You give extra grain to a strong young man, paying him strictly to hold a spear and guard your walls. You just invented the first soldier. When desperate outsiders try to steal your stored food, your hired guards violently attack them. This is the very bloody birth of organized warfare. Suddenly, the person who controls the absolute largest grain silo has the unique power to feed an entire army of loyal, armed guards. That person no longer has to bend over in the mud to pull weeds. They sit comfortably on top of the wealth, wearing a crown. Meanwhile, you are still down in the dirt, working twice as hard to feed both your family and the new king. Inequality is now permanent. You might think this terrible loss of freedom was at least worth it for a steady, completely reliable food supply that kept you safely alive. But what did that heavy wheat diet actually do to your physical body? The disturbing answer lies buried deep inside the ancient archaeological dirt. In 1984, researchers Cohen and Armalagos closely examined the fossilized skeletons of both ancient hunter-gatherers and the very first human farmers. What they discovered completely shattered the myth of agricultural progress. The bones revealed a horrifying story of sudden physical collapse and extreme biological suffering. For hundreds of thousands of years, your wild ancestors ate a wildly diverse diet of fresh hunted meat, wild nuts, seeds, and seasonal berries. Because of this incredible variety, their ancient skeletons were thick and robust, their height was tall, and their teeth were surprisingly perfectly straight. But the moment you settled down and switched to eating almost entirely starchy wheat and farmed grains, everything changed for the absolute worse. Your once perfectly healthy body rapidly degraded. The fossilized skeletons of early farmers show severe, undeniable signs of extreme malnutrition and chronic, painful anemia. Without the rich variety of wild foods, the average human height plummeted significantly. You physically shrank compared to your strong, tall hunting ancestors. And your teeth? The heavy, cheap carbohydrates from the wheat quickly broke down into sugar inside your mouth, completely rotting your teeth away. Imagine suffering from a massive, agonizing tooth infection that swells your jaw, with absolutely no modern dentists or painkillers to stop the torture. To make matters even worse, living permanently crowded together in small mud villages next to your own waste created a perfect toxic environment. When you dragged wild animals into your village to domesticate them, you unknowingly opened a massive Pandora's box of deadly, terrifying new pathogens. Domesticated cows gave your tribe the measles, while the pigs and chickens brought deadly influenza right to your front door for the very first time. You completely traded a free, adventurous life in the wild for a guaranteed existence of painful backaches, rotting teeth, and endless, miserable sickness. Fast forward 12,000 years to today. You are sitting in your air-conditioned office, surrounded by glowing screens and modern technological luxury. But inside your head, you still carry the exact same biological brain as that ancient hunter-gatherer who shared meat around the campfire. Scientists call this an evolutionary mismatch. Your ancient biology desperately expects an egalitarian tribe, but you are trapped in a hyper-competitive, hierarchical society. This mismatch is exactly why you are constantly obsessed with your social status, deeply anxious about how you compare to everyone else. When you see your neighbor buy a shiny new car or a bigger house, a primitive alarm bell rings loudly inside your head. In the prehistoric world, falling to the bottom of the social ladder meant you would be left behind to starve in the freezing cold. So today, a simple rejection at work or seeing a billionaire on social media triggers that exact same ancient, life-or-death biological survival panic. It also perfectly explains the modern human obsession with endlessly hoarding wealth, money, and material possessions long past what we actually need to survive. The trauma of the agricultural revolution hardwired us to believe that whoever hoards the largest silo of surplus calories gets to survive the winter. Your primitive brain does not understand modern banking. It just blindly urges you to pile up resources because it fears an eternal, deadly winter. You lock your money in a bank account, just like the very first farmer locked his yellow grain inside that heavy, immovable mud silo. But despite all this hoarded wealth and security, a deep, unexplainable feeling of chronic loneliness and emptiness constantly haunts your daily modern life. That is your DNA crying out. Your biology is literally screaming for a tight-knit tribe of equals to share the meat with. You live packed inside a giant concrete city, surrounded by millions of strangers, yet you are completely isolated from the community you need. We have successfully built a world of unbelievable luxury and absolute abundance. But we accidentally locked our own minds inside an invisible cage. To understand why this invisible modern cage feels so incredibly suffocating, we have to look closely at the exact size of your ancient, prehistoric world. British anthropologist Robin Dunbar discovered a fascinating, hardwired biological limit baked right into the human brain, which scientists today commonly call Dunbar's number. Your brain is physically only capable of maintaining stable, meaningful social relationships with a maximum of about 150 people at any given time. For hundreds of thousands of years, this small number was the absolute maximum size of your entire universe. Just 150 familiar, trustworthy faces. In a tribe that incredibly small, you had a guaranteed, valuable role. You might be the fastest runner, the best tracker, or the funniest storyteller. You knew exactly where you belonged. You were physically safe, completely supported, and surrounded by people who relied on you for their daily survival. But today, you wake up, pick up a glowing piece of glass, and suddenly, your primitive brain is violently forced to compete with 8 billion strangers. Every single day, ruthless algorithms show you the absolute richest, most beautiful, and most insanely successful people who have ever existed on the planet. You are constantly bombarded with endless images of private jets, perfect bodies, and massive mansions that make your own normal life feel completely, utterly worthless. Because of your ancient biology, your primitive brain doesn't realize these people live thousands of miles away. It genuinely thinks they are in your immediate tribe. And since they appear so incredibly superior, your anxious brain automatically calculates that you must be at the absolute bottom of the tribal social hierarchy. Remember what happened to the ancient human who fell to the bottom? They were abandoned in the freezing snow to slowly starve to death. This is exactly why seeing someone else's success on social media can trigger an actual, physical stress response, flooding your entire body with toxic cortisol. The pain of feeling inadequate today isn't just in your head. It is your ancient evolutionary alarm system warning you of impending biological death. We created the internet to connect the entire world together. But instead, it perfectly exploited the deepest, most vulnerable survival instincts of our species. It's not just your social life that is trapped in this evolutionary mismatch. Your physical health is being hijacked by the exact same primitive survival instincts. Think about what happens when you see a massive, greasy burger or a giant chocolate cake. Your mouth waters instantly, and you cannot resist. You feel terribly guilty for lacking self-control. But you shouldn't. Your brain is simply executing a flawless survival program designed 300,000 years ago. In the prehistoric wilderness, sweet and fatty foods like wild honey or rich bone marrow were incredibly rare and extremely valuable for pure survival. If your ancestors found a wild beehive, their brain rewarded them with a massive dopamine hit, screaming at them to eat every single drop immediately. Because in a brutal world where you might not find food again for another week, storing excess body fat was your only insurance against death. But today, you are surrounded by cheap, endless, artificial calories. You can literally order 1,000 calories of pure sugar with one tap on your phone. Yet your ancient brain still doesn't know supermarkets exist. It genuinely believes you are about to face a brutal, freezing ice age winter tomorrow morning. So it violently commands you to consume the sugar, perfectly replicating the exact same fearful hoarding behavior that started with the first mud grain silo. This is the ultimate, tragic irony of the agricultural trap. The system we originally built to prevent starvation is now slowly killing us with absolute abundance. Modern epidemics like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease are not just personal medical failures. They are the direct, unavoidable ghosts of our ancient hunter-gatherer past. We are basically ancient tribal apes wandering around a futuristic concrete jungle, completely overwhelmed by the intensely addictive artificial superstimuli we created for ourselves. Every time you mindlessly scroll on social media for dopamine or eat junk food for comfort, you are just an ancient human desperately looking for safety. The original farmers genuinely thought they were mastering wild nature by locking up the wheat. But they actually built a permanent biological prison for their descendants. And as the heavy walls of this modern, invisible cage close in around you, you might finally start to wonder, is there any possible way to escape? You obviously cannot just abandon modern society and run back into the prehistoric forest. The concrete world is here to stay, and the wild is gone. But while you cannot change the giant concrete jungle, you can absolutely hack your own ancient biology to finally escape the psychological cage. First, you must intentionally stop trying to impress 8 billion distant strangers on a glowing screen. Your brain was never built for that impossible burden. Instead, physically shrink your entire universe back down to your actual, physical tribe. Focus only on the real people standing right in front of you. Find your own 150 people. Reconnect with your family, your close friends, and the local community that actually shares your immediate daily world. Recreate the ancient campfire. Share actual meals together, talk face-to-face, and actively rebuild the tight-knit egalitarian bonds your DNA has been desperately crying out for. Second, genuinely realize that you do not need to endlessly hoard wealth for an apocalyptic ice age winter that is simply never going to arrive. The most powerful way to kill your modern anxiety is to start sharing the meat again. Give away your excess time, your energy, and your resources. When you willingly share, your primitive brain finally stops acting like a terrified hoarder and instantly feels like a deeply secure, highly valued tribal member. Look closely at the people standing at the very top of the modern social ladder. The lonely billionaires, the stressed celebrities, the modern kings. They are not truly free. They are merely pacing back and forth inside a much larger, much more expensive version of the exact same invisible cage. They are still desperately protecting their giant mud grain silos, utterly terrified of losing their status, fully trapped by the worst mistake in human history. But you can actively choose to simply drop the heavy wooden hoe of modern social expectations. You can refuse to play the endless, painful accumulation game. The exact moment you stop treating every single day like a brutal, desperate competition for survival, the heavy iron bars of your anxiety begin to dissolve. You can finally start living with the profoundly free, completely unburdened mindset of a wild hunter-gatherer, even while walking smoothly through a world built entirely by farmers. The agricultural revolution promised us absolute security and endless abundance, but it secretly stole the one thing our ancestors valued above all else. It stole our deep, unbreakable equality, replacing the warm, shared campfire with cold, locked mud silos and heavy iron bank vaults. We traded a short, vibrant life of wild freedom for a long, anxious existence of endless labor and permanent biological mismatch. But your DNA has not forgotten the truth. Deep down inside your bones, you still vividly remember exactly how to be free. You don't need to conquer the entire world or climb to the absolute top of the corporate ladder to find true peace. You just need to step outside the trap. Stop worshiping the glowing screens that constantly force you to compare your life to billionaires. Stop treating every single day like a desperate, fearful preparation for a freezing ice age winter that is never actually going to arrive. And most importantly, deeply realize that holding onto excess power and hoarded wealth will never genuinely satisfy your primitive, social brain. Only human connection can do that. Only returning to the tight circle of your small, loyal tribe will finally calm your nervous system. So, imagine this. You haul the massive, invisible burden of modern success back to your large, empty house, your mind trembling from the grueling competition. You finally drop the heavy weight of endless expectations onto the floor. Instantly, the strict laws of the modern world tell you to lock it all away. But instead, you choose to take out your knife, completely destroy your own ego, and share everything you have with the people right in front of you.